Now, though, joining us live on this Thanksgiving Eve, Dylan Douglas, Gen Z activist, host of the SiriusXM Progress show Young Americans with Dylan Douglas, which you can hear on weekends, and a tireless activist. Dylan, how are you on this Thanksgiving Eve?
Dean, I'm good. Last time we spoke, it was about a week out from the election, and I was very clear that I thought Kamala Harris was going to pull it out.
Yep.
So I want to be upfront that I was wrong, but I appreciate you having me back on neither the less. But it's good. Happy Thanksgiving. It's good to be here.
It's good. And I have you on just to call you out for failing us as a nation.
Please.
Dylan, the
Yeah.
Gen Z, not Jay Z, Jay Z, Beyonce did her part. Jay Z, I don't know where he was. But Gen Z was supposed to save us, Dylan. What happened? I'm
Well,
kidding.
maybe
But I
I'm
mean,
defensive.
what is
Maybe we're having a bit of a generational argument, which is fine, Dean. I appreciate it. I think, look,
You're a lazy generation. In my day, we would walk to the
yeah.
election vote. Oh, no, I'm kidding you. It's not your generation's fault. It's not at all. But so
I look.
what went down? What's your
We
reaction
could.
overall?
Yeah, look, we'll talk about it. This was a total collapse, a change of ideology, party change in this sort of sense that we haven't seen since they maybe the 60s with the sort of 1968 where you had the Southern Democrats now become Republicans and you have
Hmm.
segregationists leading party become Republicans and and the not segregationists becoming Democrats. It's a real realignment. And for better or for worse, and quite honestly worse because it's a realignment towards Trump's favor. I mean, just to give you some stats, when it comes to my generation, particularly young men, Biden beat Trump by 11 points back in 2020. This cycle, Trump beat Harris by 2 points. Okay, so realignment when it comes to young men, we kind of saw that. With women, Biden had a 35-point lead over Trump in 2020. That shrunk to a 24% lead. So Trump making inroads into young women. Minorities, 90% of black Americans voted for Biden in 2020. That's now to 80%. 51% of Latinos voted for Harris compared to 63% of Latinos back in 2020. And just to show you, Dean, I mean, I think just to put this in context, that you can blame my generation, you can blame any
Oh, I
number
don't
of
blame your generation.
demographics or interest
Right.
groups, but it was really an American change. All Americans felt a certain way and voted for a certain way. Trump did better in 48 of the 50 states. And I think the best way to sort of understand, again, how seismic this victory was is actually looking at some of the states that Trump lost. For example, New Jersey, where Trump did he lost by 16 points back in 2020. 5 points he lost this cycle. So to
Hmm.
give in comparison, Jersey, and it's the same with New York. Trump lost those slates by the same margins he won states like Ohio and Texas and Florida, which are traditionally considered swing states. Or at least Texas is this sort of like we dream, right, as Democrats.
Right.
So going forward, we have an uphill battle as Democrats. And it's going to take all of us, cross generations. And I'm not being an apologist for my own. I think there's validity in what you're saying about us sort of being a paper tiger, where we're very, very loud and obnoxious on Instagram, but maybe it doesn't translate into civic engagement. But it's going to take all of us to really now roll up our sleeves and do some really hard work and some soul searching as a party.
Well, look, one of the weird things after this was Democrats blaming other parts of the constituency or the coalition for not coming out or flipping votes. And I don't know if that's productive as opposed to finding out what was going on, really. That's to me more productive for those people who really are Democrats who voted Democratic before now to flip their votes. And,
And Dean, sorry to
for
interrupt.
example,
Just sorry to interrupt. Just to your point.
go ahead.
Obviously, when we have this sort of loss, and it was a total trouncing. I hope like we really understand we got beat. There's still hope in the sense that I don't think our product is at fault. We just have bad branding. And there's examples of that. For example, Missouri, a state where Trump won sizably, deep red state, where Josh Hawley, I believe their governor is, or Senator Josh Hawley,
No, the center, yeah,
yeah,
horrible guy.
won handedly. At the same time, in ballot referenda, they passed $15 minimum wage, and they actually passed more protections for abortion enshrined in their constitution. So it shows that a lot of the stuff that we're pushing as Democrats are, like we know, I think a lot of us know, are broadly popular. But for whatever reason, we can talk that out. The branding wasn't working this time.
Let's just stay with blaming Gen Z for a little bit, can we, Dylan? Here's the thing. I'm
Please,
kidding about
I'm here.
the no, but why? I'm the voter turnout across the board was lower in 2024 than 2020. So it's not specific to Gen Z. I'm asking, as someone who's a Gen Z activist, if you have any insight into this. Was there anything unique?
Totally.
According to Tufts University, which does a lot of stuff with young voters, they really focus a great deal at their one center. And they said that they estimate 42% of young voters, 18 to 29, cast a ballot in 2024, way well below the over 50% that cast a ballot in 2020. Now, 2020 was unique, making everyone be able to vote by mail just about up the turnout. Nationally, it looks like turnout then was around 66%, this time around 64%. I haven't looked at the last final numbers, but this seems to be a little bigger of a drop than the national average. Any sense why that happened?
Well, either for example, Georgia, which had some of the biggest per capita mail-in ballots, um, Gen Z roughly should make up 20% of the electorate. When it came to the mail-in, only 9% of us. And theoretically, you'd think because we have
Wow.
busy lives that the mail-in would be more conducive to our sort of vote. I think this, Dean. I think what separates us, I mean, many things from other generations, is when you're younger, when you're still in high school or college. Um, you're very connected to a broader society. You know what I mean? I think as you get older, you become more detached, not in a bad way, but from like a hard um, culture, and you start to like form your own ideas and that sort of like ponder things, and you live a more insular life with an intermediate family and the job you work. Us kids were very connected, and so when it comes to issues like, for example, Palestine, where not my entire generation had an opinion on it, even were even clued in on what was going on. If you have an undercurrent, particularly in youth spaces like universities, of dissatisfaction with the incumbency, that's going to really drive a turnout down, I think, among a broader generation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I underestimated just how sort of prevalent the Palestine thing was to a broader section of my generation, not just the activists that, of course, are promoting the pro-Palestine cause. That did damage.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, go
I mean,
ahead.
from what I saw from when that issue was raised by people, it was there's some who are activists on the actual issue, but for others, it's more about values, right? Like this is not what I'm seeing on TV is not consistent with my values. What I'm seeing on
Yeah,
Instagram is not consistent with my values. And if the Biden administration can continue to arm that and continue that, then it's inconsistent with my values. And I would say bluntly, if roles reversed, if the Palestinians had the power and they were doing this to the Israelis, I think the younger people who were moved would say the exact same thing. They'd be like, "What's going on? What are you doing to the Israelis? How are you doing
totally.
this?" So it's less around the people per se and the context of we're arming something and it looks horrific on social media and people are seeing it firsthand on their phones. So that's part of it, that values thing. But at the end of the day, like even in Michigan, because I went through the numbers and crunched the numbers there a lot, it looks like Harris lost about 20 to 30,000 votes that Biden got in towns that had big Muslim populations. Not you don't have to be Muslim to be supportive of the Palestinian cause, but it just makes it easier to talk about this. Although Dearborn Heights, very Christian, Palestinian Christian, and they voted overwhelmingly for Trump as well. But the point was, it wasn't enough to tip that state. She lost by 80,000 votes, that state. There's more out there than one issue, but if you put them together, then
It
you're like,
makes a
okay, here's
bigger
this
picture.
issue, and here's this one, and here's this one, and then you got this mosaic. You're like, oh my God, I see now what it was. Do I wish she had broken from Biden on policy in Gaza and talking about just we're going to adhere to U.S. law in the future for Israel and for every ally? Yeah, that would have been great. But I don't think that wins her election. But I think that would have been great. I would think that was the right policy thing. But that's it's an interesting discussion because people say to me like, "Oh, you Muslims, you lost your election." I'm like, "Yeah, we're really not that big in Arizona and Georgia and North Carolina, and she lost all those states." So I mean,
No,
let's
but
be
what I'm
blunt.
what I'm trying to get at is even removed from any of these sort of emotional or real issues surrounding the ongoing war. When you have, if you're living in a campus environment or any sort of like larger circle where there's any sort of dissatisfaction um,
Hmm.
in a liberal space, I think that resonates with people. It sort of has a domino effect, even to people that aren't even attached in any way or know of the issue. But to your point, we can like point fingers generationally. And you can even just say, you could write a pretty good paper saying all this is part of a larger sort of rebellion against incumbent regimes because of
Right.
the pressures of COVID and the
Hmm.
cost of living and inflation. And that's fine. But in this case, I mean, this was in a divided country as we are. I mean, this was more of a rout than it was a break for Trump. And you see that every state went more conservative. Every generation, every ethnic, religious group went more to the right this cycle. And I don't have necessarily all the answers. I mean, now there's all these like postmortems. What I fear as a Democrat is the Republicans have been criticizing this for years, but now I'm seeing my own party criticizing this idea of wokeness, which firstly, I don't even know what woke means, but the idea that we
Hmm.
may give up on our values of standing up, sticking up to the little guy and uplifting voices that have been historically silenced and just being a party of good, decent values all in the hopes of winning another election, that makes me a little nervous.
I'd become a Republican then. Like if I was going to turn my back on vulnerable communities and just try
Yeah.
to win elections at all costs, why am I a Democrat? I'm a Democrat because as a Democrat, I care about people and communities I've not met and will never meet, but I still care about them. I'm going to fight for them. But I still think that we are the party of the working class, but that message got lost because Republicans were able to co-opt us and redefine us inaccurately. And so there's got to be a way where we can make an there's no silver bullet. I wish there was, but I'm a person that believes in populist economic policies that help the working class and help the lower class and help people move up the ladder and level the playing field. And I think being known for what we really are, what we're really about as a party, what our history is, the party of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and minimum wage and unions and the ACA, we're the ones that help people. The GOP gives tax cuts to the wealthy. That's the truth. There's nothing else they've done on a policy thing. They make you feel good on culture war issues because they don't want to deliver for you on policies. They're never out there. They're not going to lower inflation. They're going to raise it with the massive tariffs. It's unbelievable what we're about to see. So, I mean, what do you think about an economic message that it in no way turning our back on any community? I'm not saying we're going to get the white working class from 1980 that used to vote Democrat, vote for Reagan. I'm talking about working class now. Working class is people of all different races and all different backgrounds. And that's the biggest chunk of who we are as Americans.
Well, it's funny, dude. I saw you on Instagram or Twitter or Threads. Right as you know, it was very clear that Kamala Harris was going to lose, and we're going to have 4 more years of Trump. You said that the resistance begins now, and I liked it. And then I thought for a second, and I said, maybe it's a coping mechanism. I have the hindsight. I know I'm never going to agree with this president on policy. I know I'm
Right.
100% never going to agree with him on a personal level. But maybe out of respect for the office and out of
Mm-hmm.
respect for the plurality of Americans that voted for him, I was going to give him a second chance. And then I saw his cabinet picks. And then I'm like, damn it, Dean was right.
No,
You
it's
got it,
not
you
going to
got
be
it, because
good.
it's just crazy. And I mean, it's just crazy. And I think we got to get ready, particularly this administration, not just for the crazy conservative stuff and all the crazy rhetoric and tone, but an administration, top down, every institution that is anti the institution that they run. A anti-government government, not a small government or a big government, an anti-government government. And that's going to be something that's very, very hard to sort of unpack. And already these tariff stuff, I mean, we all know that it's bad for Americans. We all know that tariffs just get passed on to the consumer. And not to mention that in a world right now that's already particularly unstable, when you have the biggest economic power beginning a full blown tariff policy, that begins to break down the sort of economic ties and institutions that keep our world connected. And disconnectivity creates more instability, which creates war. And you can see that time and time again throughout history. So we're going into a very dark place, and there's very little silver lining.
Well, with that said, I'm chatting with Dylan Douglas. Dylan, when I say we're going to fight Trump, just so it's clear for everyone, if Donald Trump, who has no core, comes out tomorrow and says, I want to raise a national minimum wage, I would support that. I'm not supporting him. I'm supporting a policy that helps our fellow Americans, right? I'm never going to support that guy. He's a monster. This is a man who attempted a coup and incited a terrorist attack. This is a man who demonized community after community when he was running in 2015 and 2016 that result in spike in hate crimes, record hate crimes against various communities, including my own community. So he is transactional even in his bigotry. He in 2016 demonized Muslims, made us one of the core people. Now Jared Kushner gets 2 billion from Saudi, and the
Everyone's
Muslims
buddy
in
buddy.
Dearborn cheer him, and he's like, "These Muslims, they're great. I love them. The best people ever. 2 billion bucks."
You're
He is
fantastic.
transactional.
Yeah.
What do you say?
They're so fantastic. We love them as
Fantastic people.
no,
I know all the
it's
Abduls. The Abduls are the best.
yeah.
All the Abduls. Like
And his
this is
cabinet picks, I mean, we'll see. I mean, Secretary of Defense, $1 trillion institution, 3 million personnel, including
yeah.
1.5 million active military men and women, right, in danger zones. And to have Doug Hegseth run it, not only is he
Pete Hegseth.
qualified,
Pete Hegseth.
yeah, sorry, Pete Hegseth.
Doug would be better. I don't know if
Yeah, yeah,
Doug
yeah,
is, but
yeah,
he's
Pete Hegseth.
better
I
than
mean, just
Pete.
off the
Pete is
record,
awful.
I know from some pretty good sources that he has a big drinking problem. And the
Oh, that's
fact that
interesting.
he'd be running that institution is just really, really terrifying stuff. And what scares me is I feel like we're becoming a country of self-harm in the sense that when it comes to a person like Pete Hegseth, or of course Matt Gaetz, who's dropped out, but when he was still in for Attorney General in contention, to some Americans, don't, it's not that they don't care that they're sexual perverts or in some cases pedophiles or possible pedophiles. They almost like it. I feel like because we live in the sterile world, they almost want to see terrible behavior and flawed characters because in a way it maybe humanizes them. So it's a very dystopian time. And to your point, going back to why we lost and what's going to happen, I think the truth is Trump has made a career on being a fantastic liar, not salesman, a
Yeah.
fantastic liar. And we were sold a lie. The vast majority of American people, and you and I talk about this stuff all day. I mean, some people may say to us, we may want to get a life and talk about other things, and get out of this sort of wormhole, which is politics. It's probably not good for us. It's not good for the mental health, but we love it. And because we care about this country, the average American has other things to think about. And so they
Right.
were sold this fantasy, and hopefully in 2 years come midterms, and hopefully, especially in 4 years come the next presidential election, America will wake up and realize that we were conned.
And look, one of the indicators will be the 2025 race for governor in Virginia and in New Jersey. Those are the two bellwethers. The first ones after a president gets elected. They're both open seats. Term limit in New Jersey. I had Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill on yesterday, who's running for the Democratic nomination there. And in Virginia, you can only run one term, so it's open seat. And Democrats need to hold on to both of them. And that would say something. If our coalition doesn't come out, it would be deeply alarming. I feel much better about New Jersey, but we'll see. It's when you talk to, I was on a call yesterday and I thought of you, a guy, John Della Volpe. He's the director of polling at Harvard Kennedy School Institute of Politics. I was on this national Italian American Democratic leadership thing because I'm half Italian, half Palestinian.
I love it.
So I play both sides. I'm like, I'm Italian today. Hey, how you doing, everybody? I'm Dean
Good. Yeah.
Obeidallah from Jersey.
Cover all
But
bases.
you got it. I'm from Jersey. New Jersey is a true melting pot. It still is to this day. It was when I was a kid. It remains that way. When John Del Volpe made a point in their polling, and I want to ask you about this, that they said Gen Z voters wanted Vice President Harris to be more nuanced in talking about abortion. And I'm like, what am I missing? What was going on out there? Does that resonate with you at all?
Well, I mean, I have a few problems with their campaign, um, both from seeing internally, but externally, I think that Democrats were too nice. When Trump gets shot by some crazy lunatic that has no political affiliation, and they're telling us to tune down the retoric's already hot. Trump made it
Right.
hot. We're just trying to tell the American people the truth, which is that we are in a battle for the soul of our nation and that there is a fascism lurking. I mean, that is a truthhood, the way I see it. And so you saw everyone just turn down the rhetoric for a moment. And then Kamala Harris, I think she turned away from the issues that made her special, which was abortion and which was saving democracy. And I know there's a lot of disagreement within the party because, of course, you want to focus on the economy. But the voters that have that top of mind, 60% of them already favor Trump over that issue. And I felt that Trump, going back to this sort of con artist thing, his campaign, thanks in large part to him, was able to sort of be a cipher which you could read whatever you wanted into it. So if you're maybe a conservative woman, you could say, oh, he's saying that there's not a national abortion ban, then he's
Right.
pro-abortion. right? And then, but of course, if you're an evangelical Christian, you can read into his campaign, oh no, he's the most pro-abortion candidate ever, and you can see that with a lot of other policies where he's sort of everything at once because of the
Hmm.
vagueness in which he speaks. Um, so there was issues that there was lack of branding. I mean, in our defense, right, we knew going in that it was an uphill battle. I mean, I take full responsibility. I truly believed it was a hill that we could climb.
So did
And the
I.
fact
I
that
thought we were going to win.
we came up this short, losing the popular vote was not on my bingo sheet. And the fact now that we have
Right.
a emboldened Trump that has a mandate, and now has
He
very
doesn't. Don't say mandate, Dylan. He doesn't really have a mandate. He look if you look at he swept the battleground states. Yeah, that's not good. It- truthfully, I mean, we can't make light of that. But look, we found out just tonight. It looks like the House margin for Republicans has shrunk by 2 seats. Their margin of control is 2 seats. They just lost to California, another seat, just literally before we came on. It's almost done. It's not 100%, but it looks that way. And if you flipped 151,000 votes between Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, Harris wins. It doesn't make us feel better because, again, we lost all battleground states, so we can't make light of it. There is something going on. I agree with you, but I don't think it's a mandate. I think it's a time for a reset, and it could be a realignment. But what do you think of those Democrats out there and the media people go like, we just need a Democratic Joe Rogan, which could be you, Dylan. You could be our Joe Rogan. What do you think? Are you ready to be the
I'm
Joe
not
Rogan of the
strong enough.
left?
I gotta
You
hit the
could
gym.
be.
I gotta hit the gym a little bit more, Dean, before I
You
become
got to do
the.
steroids. I think he's on some
I think so
body
too.
candy. I think he's.
I mean, look. I mean, Harris could have done more of those sort of interview things like Joe Rogan. I mean, 4 days after Trump's interview, it already had 40 million views. I mean, that's a huge media market.
I
But no,
know.
I think that again, it's the we have a solid brand. I think we have great candidates. Wes Moore comes to mind. Gavin Newsom comes
Yeah.
to mind. Not to mention, like I mean, so many others. It was a very it's been a very confusing few years for all Americans, right? I mean, COVID. Going back to 4 years, you had, I mean, true racial unrest nationally. Now you have the inflation, the cost of living that had a fundamental effect on the political landscape in every country around the world. Incumbents got creamed. So there was a lot of headwinds. Where we go from now, I don't know. Quite honestly, I think we have a lot of great candidates. What scares me more is
Hmm.
that I think Trump was the weakest candidate that the Republicans could have. And I think if you have someone like a J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or God forbid a Donald Trump Jr. Who is a little bit more suave with the branding. Donald Trump Jr. definitely not. But if you have like J.D. Vance or Marco
No,
Rubio,
he's
and it was a little bit more cunning
JD. Yeah.
and less sort of explosive and provocative. I think that if they get in, they could do a lot more institutional damage. Maybe they won't be as popular because
Sure.
I think that now we see the provocative stuff kind of works, it sells. But if you have someone that's a bit more smooth, they can do a lot more systematic damage. I think that all eyes are on Trump now, where they wouldn't be if we had someone more smooth and
I'm chatting with Dylan Douglas, host of Young American with Dylan Douglas that you can listen to on the weekends here. You said something during the campaign that stayed with me, and I even told you about it. That you said younger people of your generation, younger men,
yeah,
were seemed to be uh, attracted to Trump's message
totally.
or not gravitating towards us. And the polling ended up showing that. Like you were right about that. What was it? What can you share as someone in that generation seeing fellow young men who at 2020 young men voted for Joe Biden,
Yeah.
2024 no. What happened?
I think, and this is almost outside of politics, and this is not what I feel particularly, but this is what I feel that men generally feel in a broader sense,
Right?
is that they feel a lot of stress on them because we're living in a society that sort of has a weird double standard where a lot of the sort of dominance that men used to feel 20, 30 years ago, particularly when it comes to women, has eroded. But men, in a lot of ways, still feel both like from parents and otherwise as they need to be the provider economically. So you have that economic insecurity. And then we live in a world that when it comes to sex, which there's this great quote who says it, who's everything in life is about sex except everything in life is about sex except sex. Sex is about power, and it's a great quote. It really resonates with me because I think that there's this world right now, that as hypersexualized as it is in movies and video games and TVs, on average, the age of virginity is actually increasing. People being staying virgins longer. Actually, the amount of sex that people are having across society for my generation is less than the generation before it, the millennials. So there's this weird sort of time, especially with dating apps now. We have one-stop shopping for sexual partners. There's a lot of men that are being feeling left behind economically, sexually, which I think is important. This idea of not being
Hmm.
desired, and I think that it sounds almost superficial, but I really think there's something to it, and it's something that I want to talk about on my show, but I still haven't figured out the best way to do it. And it's something I'm still sort of it's an idea that's still sort of forming,
Right.
but I'll share it with you. But I think that's a big um, point. And then you saw, for example, the greatest example of this was Ron DeSantis, and he was trying to be like a Trump, 2.0 back when in the primaries. He released this strange ad that had all these that had reference to all these memes that are like hyper misogynistic and hyper like
Hmm.
aggressively sexual, almost like violently sexual, and it had a reference to American Psycho, which if you've seen
Yeah, I
American.
remember that. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I saw the movie. Sure, it's on cable
Yeah,
all
which
the
is
time.
like a
No, go
strange
ahead.
thing, and this is a way of him sort of identifying the archetypal man that should be voting conservative, the archetypal young man, the social media literate man that should be voting conservative. And that's, if you're portraying the American Psycho character as the archetypal Republican young man, that's a canary in the coal mine, Dean. So it's interesting.
It is. And look, when you're getting to people, and not because they're younger, they might not follow policy in detail, but they're coming to their own as a human being. It's these other issues that move them probably more than, hey, they're going to, Vice President Harris, $25,000 to buy a house. Well, that might be interesting. But this kind of visceral reaction, like, that's what I want to be. That's what I like, even if it's subconscious. So I remember that Christian Bale thing and the American Psycho, and that the thing is, Ron DeSantis can't pull that off. I mean,
Right.
that's the thing. He's not physically able, nor would JD Vance. Like, even though JD Vance may have come from the hillbillies, like he said, every time I see him, he feels like, I feel like he's talking down to me. And I'm a well educated guy. Like, he makes me feel dumb, and I don't like him. I don't like that.
Well, he went to
So I
Yale,
don't
and
think,
that can have an effect
I
on
know.
people.
Yeah, it did. I think he went to Yale Law School, and he did go to Yale Law School. And I think there's something kind of snootiness and elitism to him that he picked up going there while he was at the same time resenting it, yet admiring it. These rich people, and look where they're from. And now he's one of those rich people who has power. But it's interesting about young men, why they're appealing away. And I told you last time, you may not remember this, that my friend Max has a son who's like now just college. He's a freshman, but he was talking about it a couple of years ago that his son, who is a white guy, white straight guy, that is almost told to shut up and told like your views don't matter anymore. Your run is over. It's now it's time, and you are guilty for something. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he told me that's what he feels like in school. I'm like, get out of here. And I started to think, I'm like, that's not good in the long run. And it seems to be manifesting a little bit. And I'm not sure if that's part of it as well.
It's all
I mean,
part of it, and that's why like this woke thing has become such a hot topic issue, even though it really doesn't factor into anyone's life except the people that are affected negatively by
mhm.
it, which are Black and brown communities. Um, but look, and the other thing is that look, Trump is a fascist. And he's a fascist, not necessarily in the bad ways, which he is, but he's a fascist in what you would say, if you were a fascist, the positives of fascism are, which is he is a leader in the sense that
Mhm.
he'll hold your hand and he'll guide you. And in this world, particularly for young Americans, that we've been raised through chaos, all of which has been just targeted to us in the most obscene and obnoxious ways, inflammatory ways through social media all our lives. A leader can seem pretty good right now for a lot of us, and that's the scariest thing, is to blindly follow. And that's what I'm seeing from a lot of my generation. Um,
That's how that if you watch the History Channel or read about history, you're like, how did that person come to power? How is it that without a tank, without a bullet, they came to power through the ballot? And how did people idolize that person and worship it? And we're living through something that we've only read about in other nations or other times. It is remarkable. This is going to be studied by sociologists if you're allowed to study in the future. I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future. What about like people? older, like your parents' generation, active politically, were they just as stunned? Did they think Harris was going to win, or did they have more of a sense like, I'm not sure, this doesn't look that good, or were they feeling good like we were?
My parents, particularly, I can't speak for other parents. I think they didn't know. And they didn't know in the sense because they've lived through such a time. Right, 2016 for me was really the start of my political journey, and it really only started after Trump was elected. So that night, that
Right.
shock is lost on me. Outside of sort of like revisiting it in the retrospect, I don't really remember that time in an active way.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I think for them, they've sort of just seen this wacky time. They've known what was before, and they don't have any answers. They're just sort of along for the ride. My parents are both Democrats. My mom actually is a British citizen, but loves America. Lived in America for many years now. But my dad, Democrat. They don't know. They don't know. I was the schmuck that thought Kamala was going to win. So
No, I was look, I saw the polls, but I thought the energy I have never seen in all the years I followed politics, and I followed it since younger than you were. Like when I was in high school, I loved politics all the way through now as an adult, as an older adult. The I've never seen these size of crowds. I've never seen this kind of enthusiasm for a Democratic candidate. It was eclipsing what Obama was getting. I mean, and I lived through Obama. I was excited about Obama. I went to events when Bill Clinton was, I was a young Democrat, like president of Bergen County Young Democrats, when Clinton was running. And I remember going to the Meadowlands and he got like 10,000 people. So it's not like no one's ever done that before. But the level that Harris was getting bigger crowds in the same venues Trump was just a week later, and his crowds were getting smaller. She was raising money. The energy was there. Everything seemed like it was going well. And when I talked to activists, I never heard them talk about how hard they worked as much as this one. So I'm not naive. It wasn't like, she's going to win. No one's going to worry. I told people we could lose this, but deep down I thought we were going to win it. It was jarring. It really was unexpected. 2016, I didn't give it much thought. I'm like, I guess should win. The poll said she was going to win. It was kind of shocking. This one, the polls were much closer, but I was more confident that she was going to win than I was about Hillary. It's a wake up call for us going forward.
it
So
is because we had the benefit of hindsight this time. That's the
yeah,
other thing. And I was never a fan of Donald Trump in 2016, but for me, it was a bad man with a bad character who had hot policies that I thought were bad for Americans and for the world. And then election night 2016, 2020, when he went on that stage and said, "Stop the seal, stop the counting." Quite frankly, we did win. As the sitting president, I realized then that this is something far, far worse and terrible. And the fact that 4 years removed from that, that we're now starting this all over again, it's very disheartening. It is.
it's going to be interesting to see if the younger people in Gen Z generation who really like Trump and will they continue to support him even if their cost of living goes up? If the tariffs are inflationary, they're inherently inflationary. If goods from Mexico and Canada are up 25%, they feel it in China. If we have a recession because
There
of
will be a
mass
recession
importations,
in the next four
right?
years. Yeah,
Exactly. That's
that will be my second
and how they
prediction, and I'm more convinced on that.
right. No, I think that's very fair and very accurate. And I wonder then, do they turn or does it really become the personality cult that transcend that? They don't care. He's my guy and I love him. And I wish he could do a third term, which might incentivize him to try to do a third term and try to get the Supreme Court to reinterpret or interpret the 22nd Amendment, which I looked up has never been interpreted. No one's ever challenged it before. Who knows? The Supreme Court goes, you know what? The framers of that amendment meant consecutive, not taking a term off, even though it doesn't say that. I can't trust this Supreme Court, the GOP members, to follow the law. They follow partisan instincts. So I don't know where it's going to go. And I wonder if they're going to try to do that. So, oh, yeah. My friend. So, Dylan, last thing, what are you thankful for? I've been asking everyone. It's Thanksgiving Eve. I assume there's certain things, even though the sucky part of politics,
Yeah.
are there things you're grateful or thankful for, just in the bigger picture? Anything you
I'm
want to share?
thankful for my friends, my family, and for nature. And
Nature.
when the election happened, 3 weeks ago now, I was sort of surprised. I mean, obviously, I care so deeply. Obviously, this is like my passion, and I love my country. And I think that we have so much opportunity. I think Trump is such a distraction and such a derailment for all the possibility that we could have. Like, I'm a real patriot, and so I knew I
Right.
was going to be affected, but I was honestly shocked how affected I was by the loss. Like it really took me for a loop, and I took a week off work, didn't do the show for a week, spent time with friends,
Wow.
spent time with my family, went out in nature. As us kids say, we touched grass, And it was really, really wonderful. And I think there's so much worth fighting for. Everything's worth fighting for. The stakes could not be higher going forward. But with that all aside, there's still time in our day, in our week, to connect with the people, the loved ones, the family, the nature, the planet. It's important.
And taking that week off and recharging is something I actually advocated on the show. I had my sister on as a psychologist 2 days after
That's
the
great.
election. She's on tonight to tell people how to navigate through Thanksgiving, especially if there's a Trump supporter there. But look, Thanksgiving's challenging for everyone with family. If you add that Trump uncle or aunt, it's a whole different thing if you're going to get engaged in that. So yeah, but recharging is important. I think you come back stronger. You look at things in the bigger picture, and the resistance starts, the fight continues because we're not meeting Trump halfway.
Yes, sir.
And as I've said on Joy Reid's show and on this show and in my articles, we know who Trump is, and more importantly, we know who we are. And we're not going to compromise on our values to make him more comfortable or his supporters more comfortable. So that's where we're going forward. Dylan, happy Thanksgiving. By the way, is your show on this weekend or is it
This weekend, yep, this Saturday.
what do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, this Saturday, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I'm doing a longer form show with Mr. Beat, who's a historian, social studies teacher, and now YouTuber, big YouTuber, that pretty much brings just the lessons of American history and civics to the world through his YouTube. And we're talking about how is Trump being taught these years? How is it being taught in the classroom?
Wow.
Yeah,
I never even thought about how's he being taught. And you wonder if they're going to mandate a certain way to teach about him going
sure. We
forward
talk about all of
in the
that.
future. Like they're going to have the MAGA curriculum. This is how you have to teach about the kids. That kind of stuff. All
Yeah.
right, Dylan, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. Thanks so much. I look forward to chatting with you.
Dean, happy
If not
Thanksgiving to
December,
you
the new year.
and to all your listeners. Happy Thanksgiving.